E.P.C is a variation of the bug out bag that had a lot of considerations taken into account when it was put together. The bug out bag, it really has a lot of negative connotations. I mean, bug out really, if you think about it, it means, man, I'm bugging out. You're freaked out and you're getting the hell out of here. That brings with it those negative connotations, of course, and then you got the shortened version, the Bob, the B-O-B. That kind of sounds silly to me, but this is a little bit different than the Bob or the bug out bag. It is an emergency preparedness cache. And that literally means it's a cache of emergency preparedness equipment. You keep this stored. Think about it like your EDC, your everyday carry. This is the E.P.C, your emergency preparedness cache. Kind of goes hand in hand with your EDC. If you're carrying an EDC, you're most likely well equipped if you've got an E.P.C in your truck or your car, in the trunk of your car, for instance, or in the back seat of your truck. This is something you would, keep with you in the vehicle that you're driving at all times. That's where we're putting ours. It's going into the vehicle because we live in the northern climate, and you never know when you're going to get stranded in a snowstorm. And if you're in a snowstorm and you're stuck for days, you're gonna want to have something like this with you. And then all of the extra stuff that comes with the bug out bag is just kind of unnecessary in a situation like that. You're stranded in the car. This will get you through about 5 days being stranded, as long as you can find some way of melting that snow and turning it into potable water. As long as you can melt the snow, you can purify it with this. You can drink it with your life straw, what have you, even if you don't have the ability to make heat. So, again, this is covering all those bases. 2 is 1, 1 is none. The rule of threes. You have to have fire and shelter in extreme environments, whether it's from the sun or the rain or the extreme cold. You got to have shelter. And you gotta have fire, to produce the heat. You gotta have fire to make water potable, to cook food. You need to have water. You can't go more than 3 days without water. So you gotta have water, and you gotta have food. This covers all of that. It's great to keep in your truck. Another way to think of the E.P.C is in terms of environment, purify, cook. This goes by the rule of threes. You can go 3 hours without heat and shelter in an extreme environment. You can go 3 days without water, and you can go 3 weeks without food. We covered all of that in this bag. So it's very lightweight, it's very simple, and it relies an awful lot on extra skills and knowledge of doing things that might, shall we say, complement the bag and supplement tools that you might otherwise carry. So we're not carrying a lot of stuff. I don't have a lot of big tools that I'm carrying with, like a saw or an axe, that type of thing for gathering large bits of wood and stuff. This stove, the Bush Runner, is small enough where I can mostly run it on debris. I can burn little tiny sticks and twigs that are easy to break. My Leatherman, it can cut branches maybe 1.5 inches or so thick. So it's going to cover enough different areas where I'm needing to chop and cut. Other things, like if I need to make certain things, there's my sidearm that I always carry with me. I got a nice little knife here that it's suitable for a lot of carving tasks. And if you know how to use a knife, you can make a lot of different things. You can make utensils and traps, for instance, for catching small furry critters in the woods and supplementing your protein diet, getting some tasty grilled meat smoked over an open fire in the evening instead of your dried beef jerky. You know, there's a lot of different options that you can do when you have those skills to build the tools and things that you need in an emergency situation. You know, like, you know, maybe I need to, fix a car, for instance. And there's a lot of things that maybe I can fix with just rudimentary tools. My Leatherman covers a lot of stuff. You know, the pliers, I can get larger nuts and bolts loose. And there's screwdrivers and Allen wrenches and all of these other little bits and tools and saws, hacksaws, and stuff like that. So I can gather resources that I need and build things that I need with most of the tools that I carry. It's really important to be able to go into a situation where you can carry as little weight on your back as possible. There's a lot of people that can't carry very much weight. So this bag is good for people like that. I don't like carrying a lot of weight on my back because it hurts so much after a few days. I go out into the woods for a few days carrying 30, 40 pounds on my back. I'm going to regret it. But 20 pounds is a little bit more manageable. This is going to be a great bag for, like, if you're stranded in your car, for instance, and you got to be able to wait out a storm or make it back to your home or to your destination. There's a lot of things that can happen in this world, and you never know, when you're going to need to be able to grab a lightweight bag that you can put on your back and, hike it the heck home. A lot of the things that we've seen over the past year, there's a lot of disruptions that can happen. Even little things like civil unrest. People sometimes get the inkling to stop traffic, for instance, and burn buildings to the ground and other occurrences. So there's a lot of things that you might need to deal with where you gotta ditch the vehicle and hoof it. And when you're doing that, there's a lot of things to consider. You might not always be able to follow a road back to your home. Earthquakes can damage throughways and roads and bring down buildings that block your route. Civil unrest, large protests, for instance, can get in the way of you getting from A to B easily. There's a lot of things that can happen that cause you to have to take the long way around, and you're not going to know how long you're out. So being prepared for at least 3 days is a great idea. I believe most bug out bags they're planned around like 72-hour bags. This can be considered a 72-hour bag, but I really think I've got enough food in here that it could last you 5 days if you're really conservative, maybe 6 days or more. I don't know. If you eat like a bird, you might be able to stretch out the food here for a couple of weeks or more. Who knows? It's lightweight. It's got a lot of food to keep you going. And you rely heavily on the knowledge that where to find water, for instance. Water's not exactly always easy to find. The bush runner stove, again, if you're having to take the long way around, maybe you have to go across a farmer's field or somehow or another through private property or land that you might not be on might not supposed to be on, for instance. In those cases, it's good to lay low if you're on there for the night. If you find yourself having to, for instance, hide in some farmer's bushes out on his cow patch, sometimes it might happen. You don't know. You might end up finding yourself in a situation where that's the only safe place for you to lay down for the night, and you don't want to attract attention. So the bush runner, you can build it and have a fire that remains below ground, and you can cook your food and lay down for the night and not really give off any kind of a light or smoke signature at all. And that's great. That's great if you want to make it home alive. So there you have it, folks. This is the bag that I put together based around a stove that I invented that I call StealthFyre. It's a modular stove, which literally means that it's building blocks for fire. To build stoves, you can build a myriad designs with this stove. Anything from a small rocket stove that's 4.5 inches square, and it's suitable for the pots and pans that I carried with this bag right here. And it'll produce a hot flame that'll cook your food, it'll boil water and make it potable, and rehydrate. It'll rehydrate your soups and cook some small meals and good foods for you. And it can also make, if you have enough panels and you have the right panels, it can make a potbelly stove that has a 5-foot chimney. This is suitable for installing into like a primitive semi-permanent shelter, for instance. You've built yourself a little log cabin because you're out for a prolonged period of time, and you don't know if you're going to have a home to go to in the future. You basically, your home is gone and you've had to reestablish yourself somewhere. This will help you with a lot of things. It'll give you a potbelly stove that you can cook on top of and use to heat a small shelter, a small enclosure to keep you warm and protected from the environment. And you can use the panels for making bricks, for instance. This is a really cool ability, and you use it as a brick mold. You just basically build a rectangle and you fill it. Like we'll have these square panels. You use them to build a mold without a bottom, just a rectangle of walls, and you fill your mold to about this area with like clay, and you can leave it out in the sun, and now you're making stuff you can use for a more permanent shelter or a more sealed shelter. You can use it to build a better fireplace, for instance, something that's more sealed, more suited to an indoor shelter. You can use it to build things like a kiln, or you start putting together a forge, for instance, whatever you would need kind of the stone bricks for. And being that they'll end up being 4.5 by 9 inches and about 2 inches thick, they're nearly perfect bricks. They're a little bit bigger than your standard brick, which actually makes them a little bit more ideal for like their insulation purposes, for instance, and their heat holding properties. They're going to hold heat a little bit longer, so it's going to make a better fireplace indoors. And then you can like put a bottom in that box. And now you got a container, you've got a container that you can use to move places, you've got a container that you can use to move resources, for instance. If you got to carry, like if you need sand for some kind of building work that you're doing, you can carry a pretty hefty amount of sand in one of these 9-inch by 9-inch by 9-inch boxes that you can build with this. Sand and soil are easily moved with these boxes. You can use them, set them on your side and stack them, build them, and you've got a shelving system that you can put inside of your cabin to store gear once you've got your cabin built, for instance. You got to use your imagination. There's a lot of things that you can do with a modular panel system. It's really incredible, and it's not. It's extremely compact. The more of these panels that you get and stack together, they only grow incrementally because of how thin the metal is, and they grow incrementally this way. So the more you get, of course, the heavier it's going to get because it's stainless steel. There's some weight to it, but the more you get, the more you can build. You can build all sorts of different styles of Dakota fire pit, large and small. Like the Bush Runner can produce just a 4.5 by 4.5 inch fire hole. It's great for cooking a small fire pot, but you can build something that's almost 3 feet wide, square, with tubes coming off of it for air intake, and you got yourself a nice fire ring that encloses your fire and protects it, keeps it under control. And you can have a great little campfire in a 3 foot by 3 foot hole that's supplying great airflow all the way around, and it's not blowing any smoke, but you're still enjoying that traditional size campfire that you used to enjoy. And with a little effort, digging a hole in the ground, you can have it below ground, and it's a designated fire ring, which is really super cool. This opens up a bunch of opportunities to people like overlanders, for instance, and backcountry hikers and campers, hunters, people that are going out for days chasing after elk. Oftentimes they're left having to rely on tiny little propane heater stoves in order to cook their food while they're out there, and they kind of live an uncomfortable time not being able to enjoy that campfire anymore because they're restricted in the area from building a campfire. It's got to be in a designated fire ring, and the government hasn't supplied a designated fire ring in the place that they happen to be camping, but the government has allowed dispersed camping. You're kind of stuck in a catch-22 there, where you can have a campfire, but only in a designated fire ring, and we've kind of come to expect that it's the government that needs to supply that designated fire ring. But if we can supply our own designated fire ring, if it's feasible, if it's lightweight, it's compact, it's easy to carry in there, it doesn't take up much space, then that opens up a few more opportunities for us. We can build it large, build it small. If we want to enjoy a fair-sized campfire, you can do that with this because it's a designated fire ring. And another thing about it, that if you build it as a Dakota fire pit below ground, when you're done with it, you can literally, once it cools off, reach down in there and pick it up out of the ground. The soil falls off down into the pit. It will cover your embers, your ashes that are down there with soil, and then you just fill it in with the remainder of the soil that you dug out of the pit, put your sod pit over it, and you're done. You've left your ground basically the way you found it. It's going to quickly return to nature. In other words, there's going to be a little bit of scar there, some loose, moist soil. It'll sit around for a while before it dries and starts looking like nature again. Grass will eventually grow back, but you've returned that sod plug back, and the root system will again take hold, so it won't die. You're leaving nature the way you found it. This is a stove that complies with the leave no trace principle. When it comes to campfires in the wilderness, basically you don't want to leave a trace that you were there. You don't want to go out into the woods and gather a bunch of stones together and build a big fire ring and have a bonfire and throw a bunch of glass bottles in it and then leave it there and walk off. That's a no-no. But you can still have a campfire and leave no trace by digging a pit and installing a StealthFyre stove in it. And then you have your fire inside of the stove. Once you're done, you pick your stove up, you bury the hole, and you've left no trace that you had a fire there. It's nearly impossible to tell with the untrained eye that there was a fire there. You've returned it to nature, and that's a good thing. So there you have it, folks. This is my E.P.C. This is my everyday carry emergency preparedness cache. This is what I keep in my vehicle all the time. I keep a nearly identical one in my wife's. It covers a few different things. She's got a few medications that she needs on a regular basis, and then there's some women's necessities. A couple of things in there that add some extra weight, which is why hers is a little bit bigger than mine. But she keeps it in her car. We're going to cycle through it, or how should I say it? We're going to, after a year, keep it in our vehicle, for a year, and then after a year, we're going to pull it apart, and we're going to take the food out, and we're going to pull out all of the stuff that's set to expire or shouldn't be in there because of, like I mentioned earlier in the video, there's chicken in there and there's peanut butter, and that might not last as long as it says it does if I leave it in a truck all summer. So, we'll pull that out and replace that, cycle the food through it, keep that updated and fresh, but it's going to remain in my vehicle for the duration of the time that I have the vehicle and the backpack. This is an all-around great backpack to put together. It doesn't necessarily cost all that much to put a bag like this together. It covers all of your bases, and it doesn't take up much space. It's not a huge backpack, and I've got a medicine always in my vehicle in case of like a short-term emergency. I got my hygiene covered if I've got to stay overnight. I can always tap into this bag depending upon what the emergency is. It's going to cover all of those basic emergencies that I might have, and I'm honestly not really concerned about long-term preparedness when it comes to this bag as much as somebody would be when they're putting together a bug out bag, for instance, or when you're building your bug out location or something like that. If you got a bug out location, you're probably going to have a lot of gear there waiting for you, and you're not going to want to carry it all anyway. So your things like your axes and saws and those heavy tools and things are not needed until you reach your location. But this bag, it'll get you there. It'll get you there safely. It'll get you there securely, and it'll keep you healthy and well fed. Thanks for watching this video. I hope that I was able to give some of you some ideas for how to put a bag together, or maybe some new ideas and ways of thinking about how you're preparing yourself for an emergency. And maybe I introduced you guys to some cool gear. I don't know. I'm not really interested in introducing anybody to any of that gear other than my stove, of course. The Bush Runner. It's an excellent stove for the E.P.C or any other bug out bag. I'd encourage you guys to go to my website at www.stealthfyre.com and check out the Bush Runner and see if it's something that you'd like to put in your bug out bag. See if it's right for you. You might be interested to find that the Bush Runner will build 6 different kinds of stoves that you can use for different cooking situations. It's a great handy little stove, and each one of our kits, the Bush Runner included, it will give you right out of the box 2 working rocket stoves. So when you're buying a stove from me, you're literally buying 2 stoves for the price that you're paying. And we've got 5 different size stoves depending upon what you want to do with it, for instance. It's not necessarily a matter of how much you want to carry on your back when it comes to StealthFyre. When you get into the bigger stoves, you're looking at stoves that are, they're geared more towards people, the hardcore bushcrafters, for instance, that go out for long periods of time. They're going to pack in, a lot of stuff that's geared towards building and establishing a semi-permanent shelter situation, so that they're not using things like a tent or the stove. And the Gorilla Master stove it's right up their alley. You can build a potbelly stove with a 5-foot chimney with the Gorilla Master. You can use the panels to create bricks for that semi-permanent shelter that you're building. We've got things like the Origin, which is just a 9-inch by 9-inch Dakota Fire Hole. The kit produces, I want to say, about a half a dozen different stove designs that are useful for you in the woods. Our Origin Deluxe, it can produce, I want to say, almost 24 different configurations, because it's a combination of the Origin and the Bush Runner. We have so many different options within each of the kits available to you that everybody's going to find a useful design with this stove. They're going to find a use for it in the woods. They're going to find this stove it's a multi-tool for fire. Like your Leatherman, this guy right here, for instance, or your Swiss Army knife. This is a multi-tool for fire and for survival. It's really worth checking out. Go to our website, www.stealthfyre.com, and check out the stoves that we got available today, folks. Thanks for watching. Have a great evening.